Hey there everybody, this is Mr. Lewis, and today we're going to introduce you to the 6 stages of clay. The 6 stages of clay are part of the general clay knowledge that you're expected to learn and use on a daily basis in this class. These 6 stages refer to how clay changes over time, and each stage has its own characteristics that you can pay attention to and use appropriately. The first stage is called slip. It's clay mixed with water to a mud-like consistency. It's used for joining clay together, slip casting, or slip trailing. Usually we keep it in containers like this. Here I'm kind of pulling some out with my fingers, and you can definitely see how it's a more smooth, mud-like consistency. The way we make slip is to take dry clay and submerge it in water for a period of time. As you can see in this sped up time-lapse version, the clay starts to disintegrate. If you look closely, you can see all the little tiny particles that make up clay start to fall away from the larger piece. The longer we wait, the more the clay starts to break down. All we have to do is give it some time, and we end up with slip that we can use for various purposes. The next stage of clay is called plastic. It's soft, workable clay that can be easily molded and formed. We typically use it for hand building, extruding, or wheel throwing. Here I've got a piece of soft, workable clay, and as you can see, it's easily squished and manipulated by my hands in order to change its shape. When we get fresh clay out of the bag, it's already in the plastic stage. As you can see, the workable nature of the plastic clay is able to hold its shape once I've changed it. Unfortunately, clay does not stay in the plastic stage very long. The more we work with it, the more we touch it with our hands, and the longer it's exposed to air in the classroom, it starts to get a little dry, stiffen, and potentially start to crack and break. That's when we know the clay is entering the next stage, leather hard. It's hardened slightly, and it's the ideal stage for carving and/or building with tall slab construction. This is an example of leather hard clay. I can tell it's leather hard because when I push my finger into it, you can't see my fingerprints. Although it is still soft enough for me to scratch into it with my fingernail. Unfortunately, at the leather hard stage, clay does not like to be changed. As you can see, when I squeeze it, it splits and breaks. It's important to pay attention to the stage that the clay is in. When it moves from plastic to leather hard, you might realize it's getting a little too dry to work with. If that's the case, walk it on over to the slop bucket and toss her in. If we leave clay out long enough, it becomes bone dry. It's clay that's completely dried and ready to be fired. Be careful, it's extremely fragile at this stage. Just watch. Bone dry clay is so fragile that it doesn't take very much pressure for me to snap this piece. If this ever happens to you, don't panic, just take it to the slop bucket and try again. The first 4 stages of clay that we've covered so far are all recyclable. Please don't forget that if you do make a mistake, it's okay. When your projects are bone dry, that's when we take them and put them in the kiln to be fired for the very first time. When they come out of the kiln, they're known as Bisquare, clay that's been transformed into ceramic material after being fired once. You're ready to glaze it, paint it, or stain it at this point. After clay has been fired once, it's no longer extremely fragile. In fact, this Bisquare is much more resistant to any damage than it was before I fired it. Here's the good old hammer test, just to be sure. After you've applied your glaze, it goes back into the kiln one more time for the final firing. The sixth and final stage is called glazeware. It's ceramic material with glaze applied and fired a second time. Clay projects in this stage often look like they have color added, like they've been painted. Glaze has a very characteristic smooth surface and shiny nature to it. It also seals the clay, making it possible to eat out of or drink out of. Getting our ceramics projects to the final stage of glazeware is very important. Unfortunately, Bisquare and glazeware are not recyclable, like the first 4 stages are. Thank you very much for watching my video about the 6 stages of clay. I hope that you learned something about each stage and the differences between, and I hope that you make use of this information this semester.